We are back working on our C8, and we're going to work on removing. You can see I already have the parking brake and the stock brake caliper off, and also have the rotor off already here. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put on our MCS coilover. So we're going to take the stock coilover out, and we are also going to put the AP Racing brakes on and replace the rubber line with the braided line, Stiegler lines that come with the AP Racing kit. So we'll get after it here. So there's this little aluminum, I don't know what to call it other than a box here. I don't know if it's supposed to be something for a crumple zone for accident. I don't know. It seems kind of odd. It's just like a random aluminum block. There's one on both sides. If someone happens to actually know what this is for, let us know in the comments. Looks like its actual function is a gravel catcher. So the next thing we're going to do, now that I've got that off, is we're going to remove this bolt right here. This bolt holds the bottom of the shock in place. So with that bottom bolt being loose, we'll be able to push it out. I'm going to try to take a little bit of weight off the suspension so we can take the sway bar link out as well. All right, we'll take that out in a minute, as soon as I loosen the upper control arm bolts. So we're going to loosen these 4 upper control arm bolts. Now there's shims behind these. There's usually 1 washer behind each of them. So just want to make sure you don't drop the washers when you take them out. All right, so I did check, and there is one washer on the back of each of these bolts. So I'm going to slip them back on. They have like a little rubber core on the inside of them, so they'll stay on the bolt when they're not at the end of the travel. All right, so there is our factory rear coilover. This car does not have mag ride, so it doesn't have, otherwise there'd be a plug right here in the top of this that you would actually have to unplug and release. And if you want to change the coil, they make a tool to take that off of there, but we'll get our MCS coilover next. Let's take a minute here and look at our MCS coilover. So on our C8, we've partnered again with Motion Control Suspension, and we have one of their 3WR shocks. So it is a 3-way adjustable shock, which means it has low compression adjustment, high compression adjustment, and the remote reservoir here, which will mount up in the engine bay in the rear. And then it also has on the front here is your rebound adjustment. So we have sets of these on our Club Sports. We've done some really good work with them. They've been awesome to work with. I highly recommend them. We have a set now for our C8 project that we're working on here. We have a set for our GR. We have a set coming for our 911, and then, like I said, both of our GT4 Club Sports have them on them. So BGMSGarage is an MCS vendor. We can do installations. So if there's anything you want for your particular application, let me know, and we can certainly hook you up with anything that you want from them. So their stuff is just absolutely the highest quality. It is certainly not a cheap option, but when you are building a car like we are building, you want the absolute best, and that's where MCS comes in. So we are going to point our shock in here in the proper direction. And there are 3 bolts up on top that this plate will rotate and go into. So once we get the shock, I kind of try to get it in sort of a good position, and then we will route the shock and the container down through the control arm. You kind of want to have a plan of where you're going to route this external reservoir before you put the shock in. So we've kind of made a path up here through and around the back, up through this pocket here where we're going to pass ours through, and it seems like that'll be a pretty good position. So all right, so what I've done is I got the bottom bolt just started. The upper bolts are in their position. There's 3 nuts that go on up there. So I'm gonna get this bolt, push the rest of the way through. So this bolt in particular, I don't want to push it all the way through because it's going to make it more difficult to hook up our stabilizer. So I'm going to get it just started through like it is, get the nuts on the top, and then I will come back and put the stabilizer link on there and then get the bolt the rest of the way through. So I put the 3 nuts up on the top, just finger tight, just to hold the coilover in place while we make the rest of the adjustments down here and put the rest of this together. So we are going to try to get this in a position where we can tap this bolt through and then get our stabilizer back on. So the front of this bolt has a little tab on it that actually will lock in place. So this bolt, you don't have to hold a wrench on the other end of it. So you actually can just put the nut on here, and then we will come back and we will torque all these things into place. So the next step is top is hooked up, bottom has the bolt through it. Now we're going to put our upper control arm bolts back through, making sure that we have the proper amount of spacers. And should you take these bolts out, the front bolts, all the upper control arm bolts, there's 2 long ones on the outside and 2 short ones on the inside. So you do need to make sure those go back in the right place. I don't think you could put them in the wrong place, as it would be extremely difficult to get a wrench or a socket on these 2 inside ones. So another thing you're going to want to do here is these will have a tendency to sag down. So you just want to put a little bit of pressure on the shock and the suspension, and it will tend to square them up so you can put them in. Again, I try to start everything by hand. These are going right in by hand before we put a wrench on them. You definitely want to make sure you don't strip anything out here, but you can see how long these bolts are. They're extremely long. But putting these coilovers on, you can see it's not an extremely long process. We do already have the inner wheel liner out, and then you saw we disassembled the rear brakes and took the disc off. So not a huge deal to put these on the car. And I don't think I mentioned, but our rear shocks have 1,100 pound springs on them. Might be a little oversprung for the stock aero for the car and the stock otherwise street tires and things like that, but long term we have some pretty impressive aero going on the car, and we will be running slicks on the car as soon as our wheels come in. So it's designed, the springs are designed for the long-term goal for the car. So we're just going to snug these up, hand snug. You know, they're definitely tight, but they're not torqued. And then we'll come back and tighten all these fasteners up with the torque wrench when we're done, when we get the brakes and everything else on. So the next thing I am going to do is I am going to pull the brake line, the factory rubber brake line off, and same as we do on all these projects, we will replace them. The AP Racing kits come with Stiegler braided stainless brake lines. Really nice setup for these cars. They have the stainless brackets and things that come with them. We'll take a quick look at that right now. All right, so as I mentioned, we're using AP Racing brakes, and BGMSGarage is also a dealer and installer for AP Racing. So anything you need, we use their rotors and pads on our Club Sports. We have a set of these brakes for our 911. There is also a set of these brakes on our GR, and then we are obviously installing these on our C8. So this is their Pro 5000R caliper. This is a 6-piston caliper. If you go on their website, they can give you, there's a lot of technical data about this caliper and the advantages from a rigidity standpoint, weight standpoint. This is the 9661 caliper with, I believe, a 378 millimeter rotor on the rear of our C8. And then here's one of the Stiegler brake lines. These systems are very complete. It comes with this little stainless steel bracket that replaces the bracket that is part of the factory line. So everything goes back in just like factory. The brakes, the clips, it comes with its own banjo bolt. And this end of the line connects right to the factory hard line. So really, really comprehensive kit. And then we use the Ferodo pads. They have different brands. This one happens to be their DS1.11 pad, which is a middle of the road pad. On the Club Sports, we run the 3.12 pads, a little more aggressive pad. This was the pad they recommended for us, and it's really nice. The calipers, you take these two bolts out, the pads are super easy to slip in and out. Just an extremely nice setup, and then we'll show you the rotor once it's installed on the car. It's going to be pretty difficult for me to uninstall this and shoot the camera at the same time. There's not really a lot of room in here for my hands, let alone my hands and the camera. So thought I would take an initial shot and show you what we're starting with. So this is the factory rubber line. It goes to this hard line right here. Everything that I showed you, it bolts directly in place. So we will take all this out, and then I'll give you a shot of the aftermarket installed brake line, the stainless steel brake line. So rubber lines, no matter what you do, the rubber lines will tend to expand when you push on the brakes, when they get hot, that kind of thing. So the braided stainless lines, they don't expand like a rubber line will under force, under use. So you get a better braking feel, a little more pressure. Why don't the OEMs use the other lines like we're using? It's simple, their cost. They cost a lot more than a rubber line with crimped ends. So the other thing is the way the lines are constructed, just safer from a racing perspective. You can see our Stiegler line here installed with their stainless bracket right here. So one thing to note, you notice I haven't put the clips here yet and the clips here yet. You want to make sure this line is oriented in the proper way to sit on this caliper. In this case, it's going to sit just like this when this caliper and this bracket are installed. So you leave this a little bit loose, then you can rotate this line to make sure you get it in position. You don't want that thing bound up at all, because all it'll do down the road is fatigue and end up causing you leaks. With a line like this, as well constructed as these are, you'd probably end up having a leak either right here or at this banjo fitting. It's unlikely you would have a leak how this thing is pressed together. But super high quality stuff, and all the other sensors and everything pop right into this bracket. So great installation, great product. Next thing we're going to do is install our bracket from AP for this particular kit. Again, very straightforward. You can see this side towards disc. It comes with the mounting hardware on it. These are billet brackets that they black anodize. And installation, we put several of these kits in, and installation is a snap. It does come with hardware if you want to use their hardware. I tend to lean toward using the OEM bolts just for a more OEM look when we're doing the installation. And these bolts, just to mention, these bolts, the factory bolts, are grade 10.9. So there is absolutely no reason why you can't reuse the factory bolts. These are 18 millimeter bolts. And again, we will snug these up pretty good, but we will come back later and torque them to the manufacturer specification. I went and grabbed our rotor. So you can see this is a 2-piece rotor. You actually can just replace the disc instead of replacing the hat every time. So that goes on like so. We'll grab a lug nut. All right, so I grabbed 2 thick washers. We're gonna put those on here. The lug nut is not deep enough to hold this tight without the washers on there. So eventually we will change the lugs and the actual studs to longer ones that we use. So to start with, we're gonna put this together like this. We're gonna do a few little shakedown passes, shoot some video of it. Basically with the, we'll end up probably running Cup 2Rs on it. I have a set of those here. The factory wheels, the factory C51 Stingray wheels will not actually fit over the front brakes. So we thought we were gonna be able to run the car just on the 4S's that came on the car, but we're not going to be able to do that now since they will not fit. So caliper installed, or I'm sorry, rotor installed. Now let me grab the caliper. So on this caliper, there is an arrow by design for which way this has to go up. You want that bleeder, the top bleeder, installed in the proper direction. And it also has to do with the smaller pistons and the larger pistons, the way they travel around that pad. So you want to make sure that that thing is installed in the proper orientation. You don't need to put the brake pads in. I will show you shortly how the brake pads go in. They are quick change. It's a pretty cool setup. So when you're at the track, you can actually, we have a tool to push the pistons back when you're swapping brake pads, and it makes it pretty quick. You don't really have to take anything apart. This is the largest brake kit that they make for the back of a C8. So there's 2 sizes. And the difference with this one is you can see we're not running a parking brake, but if you do use this kit on a C8 or a Z51 car, you actually have to use the Z06 parking brake, and they make a separate bracket, a different bracket for that to go on this car. So we chose to use the larger brakes. This car is going to be a dedicated track car. We're not going to street drive it. It's a DCT. I don't really not too concerned about running a parking brake. And then we're obviously losing some unsprung weight there as well by not running the parking brake. So just giving myself another reason to have another check engine light as well, I'm sure. I'm going to put the banjo bolt in. So if you're not familiar with these, this bolt goes through, and they call it a banjo because this end of the fitting, I guess, looks like a banjo. And what it does, you put one crush ring on the outside, you put this through the banjo bolt, and then you put the other crush ring in, and then we will install this into our caliper. And then once we have that line in position, see if I can get you a shot of it here. But once we have that line all in position, then I'll come back in here. I'm going to put these 2 clips back in. But the back of the caliper here, we want to make sure that this line was in the proper position and not bound up. You see it kind of has to snake in here and fit into this spot. So hopefully you can see that now. The clip is installed there. The clip is installed here. And then the brake line is installed on the back of the caliper. Now we will remove these 2 bolts right here, and then we will drop the pads in place, and I will show you that in just a minute. We're going to remove these 2 bolts, and that's where we install our pads. Now there is an optional like a quick release clip that goes in here. I've run them both ways. I don't have an opinion if one way is better than the other. Certainly the clip that goes in there, it's just a quick clip, and it just holds the brake pedal or the brake pads down. I guess it does make it a little bit faster if you were in a racing application. It might make it a little faster, so we're going to take these 2 aluminum spacers out of here with these 2 bolts. Just going to set them up out of the way. And then these are the pads we're using. There's a shot of the part number and the compound. These are FRP 3144WB, and they are a DS1.11 compound. So if you go to AP Racing's page, under the technical information, it'll give you the breakdown of their different pads and their different compounds, the feel for those pads, that kind of thing. So we are told this is a medium, not quite the most aggressive compound, but it is what they recommended. So then these simply go straight back through here. Super easy to swap brake pads. So when you do swap brake pads, obviously the pistons in this caliper will be pushed in. AP makes a really nice tool. You just slip in here and you just crank it and it pushes the caliper, pushes the pistons back into the caliper. Makes it really easy to push those back evenly, and then you can simply slip the pads back into a new set of pads in. Now on the Club Sports, that is about a 2,900, a little over 2,900 pound vehicle, and we go through a set of front brake pads about every 6 months and a rear set of brake pads about every 9 to 10 months. And that is with us tracking just about every weekend when the weather permits. So we go through about a set of tires per car per month, and that is going to be about 6 to 10 sessions. Jack runs a little faster, a little harder, so his tires tend to not last as long as mine. I end up going to the track more frequently than him because of his school schedule and things like that. So we go through tires at about the same rate, just because I'm a little bit slower, but I go more frequently. He's a little harder on them, but a little less frequent running. So that pretty much does it as far as the installation of these brake pads go. The calipers, again, AP Racing, and give you a better shot of the caliper and the rotor installed with the MCS coilover. So we will come back and tighten all of this stuff up as I mentioned. And next thing we're going to do is go to the front. There's a lot more work to do on the front, obviously. This car was at one point wrecked. You've seen in a previous video, it has been fixed though. So we're back at the stage of putting all of these parts back on the car and getting it ready to run. So in our last video, we showed how we repaired the front end of this C8. And you can see now that we are ready to start the assembly. So we have to still put the rad pack on this side, the front crash bar, the brake booster. There's a lot of parts that are still off of this right here. We did unmask the car where I had it taped up where we were doing some welding. But you can see kind of everything here has to go back on. So we'll put the fender back on, all the front end. We have a different nose coming for the car. So long-term plans with the aero dictated us getting a different nose for the car, not specifically for the aero, but we are going to make some other changes to the front end of the car that we think will be beneficial long-term to the performance of the car. So Black Friday special, CF Performance, we got a Z06 style front end that works with the stock Stingray fenders. So pretty excited about that. It comes as a complete kit, and it'll basically go right in place. The one we have, the bumper itself was fine, but all the front splitter and all the associated parts with it were all missing. So I don't know if you guys have ever looked at the cars at Copart or purchased a car from Copart. Pretty much all of the damage that came from the front end, the fender, and the rear fascia on our car, all from it being handled at Copart, not from the wreck. There's a lot of little scrapes and scratches where the thing, you can tell it was picked up with a forklift, moved around like that. So we're going to replace that. And we'll eventually, we've got some ideas on a wrap for the car, which we will have AZ Rags here local to us do. They wrap all of our stuff. Phenomenal job. If you ever need anything done, hit us up. You can put a comment below. We can give you their contact information as well. But we'll get started here. On the front end, probably a little bit easier for you to see, but I'm going to start again with removing the brake line, which this is the factory rubber brake line. So we've just got, obviously, the connection that was on the caliper. And we'll take this bracket loose and take the line loose here. Then we'll put our braided stainless Stiegler line from AP Racing on. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is put our front coilover in. I'm trying to do this kind of in a way that I may not do if the car wasn't this far apart, but it's also pretty easy to access this right now. And right now we're going to tie our front lift lines up out of the way. We're not going to use the factory front lift. We do have a front lift cylinder on our MCS coilovers, and once we get this moving, we're going to try to see if we can make that work with the factory system. So this is our front coilover, and again from Motion Control Suspension, and this one has a 1,000-pound spring. I mentioned the 1,100-pound springs in the rear, and this actually, I mentioned their front lift system, so there is actually a pancake cylinder right here. You can see the fitting here, and this actually, I'm not sure how much front lift travel this provides, but we had discussed this with them, told them we would like to actually try to make this work on our car, just so they have the opportunity to see if it will work on a car with factory front lift. Don't know initially in looking at it, they have their own control system for this. We'll have to see what it does and whether we decide to actually use it on the car if we can get it working or not. But again, this shock is a three-way, so high and low compression, also bump, they call it bump, and then rebound adjustment up here on the top of the shock. So these coilover systems, having installed several of them now, it is amazing. They do go right in. You saw how easy the rear one was to put in, and the front one will be the same amount of work. So we're going to get our coilover put in. And again, this lines up with 3 bolts in the top. So we are going to make sure we get this oriented where it is lined up with those 3 bolts. And then we will set it over the lower mount here. And then we will put the bolt through the lower mount and apply a little bit of pressure to this, I think. So now the lower bolt is through, the upper bolt is through as well. And then we're going to want to make sure we have this thing oriented in the proper way. On this car, it's not so big a deal, but in some applications, you really need to make sure you have that line, particularly on the Club Sports. You need to make sure you have that line oriented in the proper direction. Otherwise, it's a problem when you go to put the shock, bolt everything together and tighten the suspension up finally. So let me get a look, give you a look from this side of the car as well. You can see our bottom bolt down there installed, and then the top of the shock in this seat. This white powder that is there, normally I would probably clean that up, but I'm not too concerned. This is going to be a track car. The first time we wash the car, it'll come off. You can see the dots as well. This is scanning spray. So when you 3D scan, we have a blue light scanner, which we've actually shot some footage of scanning the front suspension of this car and the rear quarter and one of the front fenders as well. And when you scan, if something is too shiny or reflective, for example, glass or something that's silver, a lot of times when I scan suspension components, you actually have to use the scanning spray. That up inside that pocket was so glossy, it actually did not pick up well. So they have disappearing spray, they have regular spray. I typically just use the regular spray, and then, you know, I'm not too worried about removing the dots either. This car will have wheel liners put in it. By the time everything is put back together, you're never even going to see the fact that I had the dots in there or have the scanning spray in there either. So I put the 3 nuts on the top here. A little difficult to see on camera. I can show you a shot of that afterward, but they're just 3/8 by 1.25 millimeter nuts. So the next thing we're going to do is put these upper control arms in, and I may have to put a little bit of upward pressure on the suspension to get the bolts to line up. We will see though. Nope, these are all lined up nicely. All right, so again, once we get all this stuff installed, we'll come back and torque all this stuff. So if I'm not videoing while we're working, I will stop and torque each individual thing. But I end up having to stop and do things while I'm videoing. So I want to go back afterward and make sure everything is torqued. I mean, you're going to end up driving this car 150, 165 miles an hour on the track. So I want to make sure every nut and bolt that I go back over one at a time specifically to make sure everything is tightened and it's torqued properly once we get done with everything. So the next thing I'm going to do is grab the caliper bracket and install that on the front side here. Again, pretty straightforward. Disc side goes in place here. All you're really doing is spacing out the mounting location for the caliper. So I did look, and the rotor that we are putting on this car is AP's 390 millimeter rotor on the front. So it's quite a bit larger than the factory Z51 rotor, but it actually is a little bit smaller than the carbon ceramic. So the carbon ceramic GM rotor is 398 millimeters, and this one, like I said, is 390 millimeters. So pretty interesting comparison there. All right, so there's the caliper bracket. I'm going to grab the rotor and install the rotor next. All right, we are going to install our giant 390 millimeter AP rotor. Give you a little better shot of it there. And again, to hold it square, we use a couple washers. There you go. So next we're going to install our AP Racing caliper. So this is a 9668 caliper. This caliper is their widest caliper as far as I know. And this enables you to run a 1-inch thick brake pad. So any of you guys that track, you know a factory pad is maybe a 1/2 inch thick, 5/8 of an inch thick. So by running a 1-inch thick pad, you get a lot more pad life out of the pads, and consequently you're not beating up a rotor. I know some of the guys that track their C8s actually will burn up an entire set of brakes and pads and rotors in one weekend of hard driving on a set of factory pads and rotors. So clearly we don't have those issues running the AP stuff. So we're going to put our brake line into the caliper next. Again, we want to make sure everything lines up and that line is not in a bind. Our last step here is going to be to take out these 2 bolts, same as we did on the rear, and slip the brake pads in. So one of the things I mentioned with the use of this 9668 AP Racing caliper, you can see how thick this brake pad is. It's a full inch thick, and probably twice as thick as a normal, or a little bit thicker than a normal production brake pad. So you really get a lot more use, a lot more time, longevity out of these brake pads. And again, super simple to drop these in. They just drop in like this. Same thing with these calipers as the rears. There is a optional clip, but I'm just going to put these aluminum brackets back through. As you know, if it takes us 5 minutes instead of 2 minutes to change brake pads, it's really irrelevant. We're not racing the car in competition, so we won't have to change brake pads in an urgent situation. There you have it. So now our front suspension is completely repaired, and all this stuff is back together. So once we get the car completely back together, we'll obviously set it down and set our ride height. So we're at the point now where we're just going to start piecing everything back together that we took off the car to do the repair. So I'm going to start here with the hood hinge, and we will likely have to do some adjustments once we get this back, get the hood back on the car and everything. So for now, we're gonna just eyeball it and kind of put it back where we think it needs to be, based on the the markings we can see on the paint. We are going to go ahead and slip our radiator pack back into position. Once we get all the bolts in it, we'll come back and tighten everything up. I'm gonna slip the radiator hoses back over the radiator. going to catch some of these bolts that are on the frame rail under here. There's quite a few of them that bolt these radiators in, and we actually disassembled quite a bit more than we probably had to, thinking that we were going to have to repair the frame a little differently than what we did. Quite a few little small 10mm bolts that hold this radiator pack in, so now that I have it mostly lined up with this front frame rail, this frame rail is also currently loose, so I wanted to get the radiator pack lined up, and then we'll tighten both of them up. So we've got all three hoses back on the radiator. There's one end here we took off, and then two up here. The bottom one on this side we did not remove. So it'll be interesting to see how hard it is to bleed it. I noticed there's some bleeds up here in these lines. The coolant reservoir is all the way in the back, so I'm sure it'll be a chore. We do have a vacuum coolant filler, so we will try to use that, but hopefully it won't give us too much trouble. Next, we're going to start pushing some of this wiring through. So this harness for the fan, for example, we've got some other plugs up here that we just kind of had to move everything out of the way in order to get to the area that was damaged before. So we're going to tuck these back through and get them secured back in their original location. Okay, we got the fan harness back where it's supposed to be. Then there's some other little push pins, things like this on these other parts of the harness to hold them in a position where they can't get damaged by anything. All right, so I think that does it for the radiator pack. We've got the brake ducts. There's another piece that goes on once we put the crash bar on, but the next thing I'm gonna work on is the brake master and the brake lines, just because I have easy access to it before I put the crash bar and everything else back in. Well, hopefully I have the camera in a pretty decent position to see what you can see what I'm doing. So when we put the cradle back in, we actually hook the steering back up. Then there's a little bracket here that has two nuts on it that have to go back in. The brake lines come up here and go to the booster. And we talked about that being an electric booster. And then we'll start to route the lines, get the brake lines hooked all back up. So before I disassembled everything, hopefully you can see this on camera, I actually took pictures of the locations of everything. We try to do this whenever we take things apart. It makes it much easier, obviously, if you have reference to where wiring harnesses are routed, things like that. So for example, I just went and grabbed the drawing so I could see where this HVAC line had to go back in. It connects up here. And then also so I can see which bolts, make sure I put the correct bolts back in them. You really want to make sure you get all the grounds hooked back up, because generally if you have a problem when you put something like this back together, you've probably left a ground off somewhere. All right, so we did a little bit of pre-assembly of the booster on the bench. I'm gonna try to move this closer so you can get a better idea of what I'm doing. There's obviously 4 lines that come out of that booster, and they go into these 4 positions here. So we're gonna tuck that in here and then route those lines into that. I'm actually gonna take these 2 lines for the front back out. It seems like it'll be easier to reach the rear lines if I can take these out of the way, and they will be easy enough to put back in. Once I have the other lines in. All right, so I've got the 2 rear lines in. Now we're gonna go ahead and take a ridiculously long extension and tighten these bolts up. These are the bolts that actually hold the master cylinder to the firewall. It really is important that you put these lines in with your fingers so you can feel and make sure that they are not at all cross-threaded. It'd be a huge problem to fix these if you cross-thread them at this point. Okay, so that's got all 4 of these brake lines in, and I'm just snugging up the bolts that are holding the brackets just to make sure. I loosened them up so the lines had a little bit of flexibility as I was putting them together. So let me see if I can give you a better look at what we've done here. So you can see the booster installed, and then all 4 of the lines back down into the bracket, the distribution blocks. All right, so the brakes are finished. We still have to, all right, the brakes are finished. All we have to do is bleed them, and then we'll start putting the rest of the body back on, the rest of the front end. This is gonna do it for this video. Please do click like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. We've got more content coming. Next week we'll have another F40 video. Then the week after that, hopefully we will get some clear weather and be able to take this thing out on the track. Thanks again for watching.